The handshake happened on a Tuesday morning in the gravel lot behind Becker's Feed and Seed, where Lloyd Harmon counted out $3,200 bills into Ray Sullivan's palm, while Martha Sullivan was 12 miles away at the county health clinic with her youngest daughter. The tractor was already on the trailer, tire chains wrapped and secured, the faded red paint catching the October sun. Ray folded the cash once and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Lloyd didn't ask questions. He'd gotten what he came for. Ray climbed into his truck and pulled out onto Route 14, heading west. He didn't call Martha. He figured he'd tell her when the time was right. He figured she'd understand eventually. She didn't find out that day. She didn't find out the next day either. She came home from the clinic with Anna, age 6, who'd needed her immunization records updated for school registration. Martha made dinner. She helped Anna with her reading homework. She went to bed thinking about property taxes and the payment she owed the propane company and whether the furnace would hold through another winter. It was Ray's wife, Linda, who told her. Wednesday afternoon, Linda stopped by with a casserole she said was extra from a church function. Martha invited her in. They sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee, and Linda kept glancing toward the machine shed visible through the window. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry about the Farmall, Martha. I know what it meant to Bill." Martha set her coffee cup down slowly. "What about the Farmall?" Linda's face changed. She understood immediately that she'd made a mistake, but it was too late to take it back. "Ray didn't tell you." Martha stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the machine shed. The door was open. She could see the empty space where the tractor had been parked for 4 years. The oil stain was still there on the concrete. The tractor wasn't. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask Linda to explain. She walked outside, crossed the yard, and entered the shed. The chains that had hung on the wall were gone. The wooden blocks Bill had used to keep the front wheels off the ground were stacked in the corner, unused. There was a rectangle of clean concrete where the Farmall had sat, darker than the dust-covered floor around it. Martha stood there for a long time. Then she walked back to the house. Linda was still at the table, looking miserable. Martha said, "Thank you for the casserole." Her voice was calm. Linda left quickly. That evening, when Ray came home, Martha was sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad and a calculator. Anna was watching television in the living room. Ray hung his jacket on the hook by the door and said, "Linda called. She said she stopped by." Martha didn't look up. "Where's the Farmall?" Ray sat down across from her. He'd been rehearsing this conversation in his head for 2 days. Lloyd Harmon bought it, paid cash, $3,200. Martha wrote the number on the notepad. "When?" "Tuesday morning." "Why didn't you tell me?" Ray leaned back in his chair. He was 41 years old, Linda's brother, Bill Sullivan's brother-in-law. He'd been helping Martha since Bill died 16 months ago. He'd fixed the fence. He'd helped her negotiate with the bank. He'd given her advice she'd actually taken. He thought he'd earned the right to make this call, because you wouldn't have agreed, and it needed to happen. Martha looked at him for the first time since he'd walked in. "It was mine. It was sitting in a shed, collecting dust. You haven't started it in 4 years. You don't need it. What you need is money to keep this place running." "I didn't ask you to sell it." Ray's voice hardened just slightly. "Martha, you owe the bank $14,000 on equipment you can't afford to keep. You owe another $6,000 scattered across town. You're 2 months behind on the grain elevator bill. You need cash, not sentiment." Martha didn't argue. She wrote another number on the notepad. Ray watched her, feeling the conversation shift in a direction he didn't like. "What are you doing?" Figuring out how much I owe you for selling my property without permission. Ray's jaw tightened. I was trying to help. Did I ask for your help with this? You don't have to ask. That's what family does. Martha closed the notepad. Where's the money? Ray pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the table. Martha opened it and counted the bills. $3,200, exactly. She put the envelope in her purse. Thank you for bringing it. Ray stood up. You're angry now, but you'll realize I did the right thing. That tractor wasn't doing you any good. This money will... Martha didn't respond. Ray waited for her to say something, then left. The screen door slapped shut behind him. Anna came into the kitchen. Where's Uncle Ray going? Home, Martha said. Is he mad? No, sweetheart. Go brush your teeth. After Anna went to bed, Martha sat at the table and looked at the $3,200. It was real money. It would cover the grain elevator bill and part of the bank payment. It would buy time. Ray was right about that much. But Ray didn't understand what the Farmall meant, and Martha realized she'd never been able to explain it. Not to Ray. Not to anyone. Bill had bought the 1947 Farmall M in 1968 from an estate sale 3 counties over. It was already 21 years old then, but Bill said it was built right. The kind of tractor that would outlast anything International made after 1960. He'd driven it home himself, 63 miles on county roads, and parked it in the machine shed like he'd brought home a prize. Martha had been pregnant with their son Jesse at the time. Bill had worked on that tractor every spring for 14 years, adjusting valves, changing fluids, repainting the wheel hubs. When he died in the combine rollover in June of 1982, the Farmall was the last piece of equipment he'd personally maintained. Everything else on the farm, the newer tractor, the planter, the truck, had been serviced by someone else. But the Farmall was Bill's. Martha hadn't been able to start it after he died. She'd tried once, 3 months after the funeral. She'd sat in the seat, her hands on the steering wheel, and couldn't make herself turn the key. So she'd left it, and it had sat there for 4 years, waiting. Now it was gone. She put the money in her purse and turned off the kitchen light. The next morning, Martha drove to the bank. She met with Dennis Crom, the loan officer who'd been managing Bill's estate since the accident. She gave him $1,500 toward the equipment loan. Dennis updated the ledger and said, "This helps, Mrs. Sullivan. Keeps you current for another 2 months." Martha nodded. "I need to ask you something." "Of course." "If I wanted to buy a piece of equipment, something older, low cost, would the bank finance it?" Dennis looked uncertain. "Depends on the equipment and the terms. What are you thinking?" "I'll let you know," Martha said. She left the bank and drove to Halvorson's Implement, a used equipment dealer 40 miles west in Carroll County. She'd heard Lloyd Harmon did business there. The lot was full of tractors, planters, discs, all lined up in rows with prices painted on the windshields. Martha parked and walked toward the office. A man in coveralls intercepted her. "Help you find something. I'm looking for Lloyd Harmon. Lloyd's not here today. Can I help? Do you know if he brought in a Farmall recently? A 1947 M, red, repainted hubs?" The man thought for a moment. "Yeah, Lloyd dropped off a Farmall Tuesday. It's out back. You interested? I'd like to see it." He led her around the building to a storage area where older equipment sat waiting for evaluation. The Farmall was parked near the fence, exactly as she remembered it. The man said, "Lloyd wants $4,800 for it. Engine's solid, but it needs tires and some electrical work. You looking to buy?" "Maybe," Martha said. "Who sets the price?" "Lloyd does. It's his tractor." Martha walked around the Farmall slowly. The paint was faded but intact. The serial number plate was still riveted to the frame. She'd memorized that number years ago. She touched the steering wheel, then stepped back. If I wanted to make an offer, how would I do that? You'd talk to Lloyd. I can give you his number. Martha took the number and left. On the drive home, she did the math. She had $1,700 left from the sale. She had $800 in her personal account. She had a jar in the kitchen with another $200 in small bills. That was $2,700 total. Lloyd wanted $4,800. She was $2,100 short. That night, Martha called her sister Patricia in Des Moines. Patricia answered on the third ring. Martha said, "I need to borrow money." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "How much?" $2,000. "What for?" Martha hesitated. Then she said, "I can't explain right now, but I need it by Friday, and I'll pay you back within 6 months." Patricia exhaled slowly. "Martha, are you in trouble?" "No, I just need help with something." "Does this have to do with Ray?" "Partly." Patricia didn't ask more questions. "I'll wire it tomorrow. But you have to tell me what's going on eventually." "I will," Martha said. "Thank you." The money arrived Thursday afternoon. Martha drove back to Carroll County Friday morning. She called Lloyd Harmon from a payphone outside a gas station. Lloyd answered. Martha said, "This is Martha Sullivan. I understand you bought a Farmall from Ray earlier this week." Lloyd's voice was cautious. "That's right. I want to buy it back." There was a pause. "Ray said it was his to sell." "It wasn't. It was mine." Ray had no authority. Lloyd didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "Look, Mrs. Sullivan, I paid cash for that tractor. I'm not trying to get in the middle of a family thing, but I've got my own money invested. I'll pay you $4,800. That's $1,600 more than you gave Ray. Cash. Today." Lloyd was quiet again. "Ray know about this?" "No. He going to have a problem with it. That's between Ray and me." Lloyd sighed. "All right. Meet me at Halverson's at noon." Martha met him at the lot. She counted out $4,800 in hundreds and twenties, money she'd withdrawn that morning from 3 different banks. Lloyd signed a bill of sale. The man in coveralls helped her hitch the Farmall to a rented trailer. Martha drove home slowly, watching the tractor in her mirrors the entire way. She parked the Farmall in the machine shed in the exact spot it had occupied before. She unhooked the trailer, returned it to the rental place, and came back home. Anna was at school. The house was quiet. Martha stood in the shed doorway and looked at the tractor. It was back. It was hers. But she was now $4,800 poorer, and she still owed the bank, the grain elevator, and the propane company. Ray found out Saturday morning. Linda had seen the Farmall in the shed when she drove past on her way to town. She called Ray. Ray showed up at Martha's house an hour later. He didn't knock. He walked into the kitchen where Martha was making lunch. "You bought it back." Martha didn't turn around. "Yes." "From Lloyd?" "Yes." Ray stared at her. "You paid $4,800 for a tractor I sold for $3,200? "I did." Ray's face reddened. "That's insane, Martha. That's $1,600 you just threw away. Do you understand what you've done?" Martha turned to face him. "I bought back something that wasn't yours to sell. I was trying to help you. I didn't ask you to sell my tractor. You made that decision on your own." Ray's voice rose. "Because you're not making the hard choices. You're holding on to sentiment while your bills pile up. That tractor is worthless to you. It doesn't plant your crops. It doesn't pay your debts. It just sits there reminding you of Bill, and you can't afford that luxury anymore." Martha's voice stayed level. "It's not your decision what I can afford. I'm trying to keep you from losing this farm." Then stop selling my things without asking. Ray slammed his hand on the counter. You're being irrational. You just spent money you don't have on a piece of junk you don't need. What's next? You going to buy back every piece of Bill's old equipment just because it makes you feel better? Martha looked at him without blinking. Get out of my house, Ray. Ray froze. What? I said get out. I appreciate the help you've given me since Bill died. But you don't get to make decisions about my property. Not anymore. Ray's jaw worked silently. Then he said, You're going to regret this. When the bank forecloses and you're explaining to Anna why she has to leave the only home she's ever known, you're going to remember this moment and realize I was right. Maybe, Martha said. But it'll still be my choice. Ray left without another word. Linda called that evening to apologize. Martha said there was nothing to apologize for and ended the conversation quickly. Patricia called Sunday morning wanting details. Martha told her the short version. Patricia said, You spent $4,800 on a tractor. Yes, Martha, that's... I know what it is. Patricia was quiet. Then she said, Okay, but you're paying me back in 6 months like you promised. I will. And you're going to tell me why this mattered so much. Someday, Martha said. Word spread through town faster than Martha expected. By Monday, half the people at the grain elevator knew she'd bought back the Farmall. By Tuesday, the story had reached the diner, the hardware store, and the feed supply. People had opinions. Some said Martha was being stubborn. Some said she was being sentimental. Some said Ray had overstepped. Some said she'd made a smart move standing up for herself. Most just shook their heads and figured it was none of their business. Martha didn't explain herself to anyone. She paid her bills with what was left of her money. She worked her shifts at the veterinary clinic. She picked Anna up from school. She made dinner. She lived her life. The Farmall sat in the machine shed, waiting. 3 weeks later, Martha woke up at 4:30 in the morning. She made coffee, dressed in work clothes, and walked out to the shed. She opened the door and stood looking at the tractor in the dim light. Then she climbed into the seat. The key was still in the ignition where Bill had left it 4 years ago. Martha touched it, then turned it. The starter cranked. The engine coughed, hesitated, and caught. It ran rough for 10 seconds, then smoothed out into a steady rhythm. Martha sat there with her hands on the steering wheel, listening to the engine. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just sat there feeling the vibration through the seat, smelling the exhaust and old gasoline, hearing the sound Bill had heard every spring for 14 years. After 5 minutes, she shut it off. The silence felt different than it had before, lighter somehow. She climbed down, closed the shed door, and went back inside to wake Anna for school. That afternoon, Martha drove to the bank. She met with Dennis Crom again. She said, I want to restructure my equipment loan. Dennis pulled out her file. What did you have in mind? I want to pay off the remaining balance over 3 years instead of 2. Lower monthly payments. Dennis ran the numbers. That'll cost you more in interest. I know, but I can make smaller payments reliably. I can't make the current payments reliably. Dennis studied her. Mrs. Sullivan, I have to ask, are you planning to farm with that Farmall you bought back? Maybe, Martha said. Why? Because if you are, I need to know what your operating plan looks like. The bank can't support a farming operation running on equipment that old. Martha met his eyes. The bank isn't supporting my farming operation, Dennis. I'm supporting it. The Farmall is paid for. It runs. It doesn't owe anyone anything. If I decide to use it, that's my business. Dennis didn't argue. He approved the restructure. Martha's new payment dropped from $380 a month to $220. It gave her breathing room. Not much, but enough. She left the bank and drove home through town. She passed Ray's truck parked outside the hardware store. She didn't stop. That spring, Martha planted 40 acres of soybeans using a rented planter pulled by the Farmall. It took her 3 weeks. The tractor moved slowly, burned gasoline instead of diesel, and required patience. But it worked. She cultivated in June and July. She harvested in October using a custom operator. Her yield was modest, 31 bushels per acre, but it was positive. She sold the crop in November. After expenses, she netted $2,400. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She paid Patricia back $1,000, put $500 toward the bank loan, and kept the rest for operating costs. Ray never apologized. He and Linda stopped visiting. Martha saw them occasionally in town. They were polite but distant. She didn't push for reconciliation. Neither did Ray. 2 years later, Martha paid off the equipment loan entirely. She sent the final payment to Dennis Crom with a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for your patience." Dennis called her that afternoon. He said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Sullivan. You did something a lot of people didn't manage to do." Martha thanked him and hung up. The Farmall stayed in the machine shed when it wasn't working. Martha maintained it herself now, following the manual Bill had kept in his workshop. She changed the oil, replaced filters, greased the fittings. The tractor didn't ask for much, just care and fuel. Anna grew up watching her mother work. She learned to drive the Farmall when she was 12. She learned to hitch implements when she was 14. She asked once why the tractor mattered so much. Martha said, "Because it was your father's, and because nobody gets to decide what I keep and what I let go." Anna understood. People in town eventually stopped talking about the Farmall. It became just another piece of equipment on the Sullivan farm, no different from the planter or the cultivator. But Martha knew what it represented. It wasn't about farming efficiency. It wasn't about monetary value. It was about the fact that when someone tried to take something from her without asking, she'd taken it back, and she'd done it on her own terms. She didn't regret the $4,800. She didn't regret the argument with Ray. She didn't regret any of it. The farm stayed in the family. The Farmall stayed in the shed, and Martha Sullivan kept working, kept planting, kept making decisions that were hers and hers alone. If this story surprised you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.